what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it. Let's go to a guy who's not a buster, our guy, Shea Dixon from On3 Sports. Shady, what's happening, brother? What's going on, man? How's your May 3rd going during this wonderful temperate spring that we've been having?
Amazing now that I am certified not a buster.
Yeah. Bust up. We don't, Shay, be careful. No hard R's on this show, okay? Bust up. You are not a bust up. This is true.
Feel good about that then.
How do you feel about where LSU stands recruiting-wise right now? Now, I want to get into everything. We're going to get into the coaches hitting the road, draft, all of that. But we talked about last week, Trades Green committing to LSU. Huge guy, like literal, 6'8", 6'9", tight end. But what's the bigger deal to me is you look up, Shay, you look at the top 10 recruits according to On3 in Louisiana, and they were all LSU commitments or heavy LSU leans. Has Brian Kelly answered the question about whether or not he can recruit the state of Louisiana?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's always going to be a work in progress to make sure you lock down the state every year. I also think having a number of people on staff familiar with the state, namely Frank Wilson, who's done this many, many times in terms of recruiting Louisiana and doing it for LSU, was massive. I still think that was one of his biggest hires, to bring a guy like Frank back who can handle, the ins and outs of Louisiana. They put together a great staff of personnel guys who do the same. So I do think that they're sitting in a good spot. And look, I think you bring up something well. I was about to pull that up myself because I think that's a good talking point, T-Bob, in terms of look at Louisiana right now, for instance, and you mentioned it. You look at the top 10 players in the state, everyone that is committed somewhere is committed to LSU, and everyone that's not committed somewhere at the moment is considered a lean to LSU. So that's what you want, right? You want to be able to lock up the best players in Louisiana year in, year out. A year ago when this staff took the job, remember what the top 10 players in the state looked like? It was Arch Manning leaving the state, Eli Holstein leaving the state, Derek Williams over at Westgate going to Texas, Tackett Curtis leaving the state, Jay Nosberry leaving the state. So it was one of those rare times where you looked at the top players in Louisiana and LSU wasn't getting them all, and you understood why. It was a transition year. They were coming off back-to-back 500 regular seasons, but I think it's a pretty good sign that that's starting to shift the other way. Let me see. 1, 2, 3. LSU only signed 4 of the top 10 players in the state a year ago. Right now, they've already got 4 of the top 10 players in the state committed, with the other 6 they lead for.
And Shay, we were talking about this yesterday. It does feel like it's from top to bottom in the state. And Brian Kelly's done a really nice job of, going up to the 318. And look, I know our listeners kind of roll their eyes because they get tired of me talking about it, but that's an important part of it. You've got to hit the entire state because, some of the guys that you mentioned there in the northwest part of the state, those are guys that left the state, but it does feel like he understands that it is an entire state, not just one area of the state.
100%. And we've got an amazing on On3 right now. They're building a database that's just unlike anything I've ever seen. But you can go and look at NFL drafts, which is what we do. The recruiting, or I should say the recruiting scouts, not me, but the people that work for On3. You're projecting towards the NFL draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got 32 5-stars for 32 first-round picks. We've got 200 and a top 300. They usually have about 270-something picks in the draft. In terms of draft-to-talent ratio, which is pretty much, simply put, guys, like a per capita thing, LSU over the past 10 years has been number 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1, 3, 2, 1 nationally among the 50 states. So you're producing per capita 1, 2, and 3 state-wise the best in the country. In terms of actual blue-chip share, like if you just throw all that aside and include Texas's population, all that, LSU's still averaging about number 5 or 6. So I've said it all the time. Texas, California, Florida, Georgia, those are known as the states that are going to produce the most amount of future draft picks or whatever it might be. But Louisiana's right there in the top 5. That's why Brian Kelly, a reason you take this job. You can come here. Everyone recruits all those other states. only LSU is here in Louisiana. If you're able to hold that down, you're building a pretty good foundation. And Jacob, just so that you don't have to say it, I went and did all of the research over the past 5 NFL drafts. 54 kids were drafted who went to high school in Louisiana. So I know this isn't counting any Katrina kids who moved off and played in Texas or grew up somewhere else,
right,
or guys who went to IMG or something like that, guys who graduated their senior year in high school in Louisiana. 43% of those guys did play at LSU at some point, whether it was as a transfer out of high school. No surprise that the NOLA metro area leads the way, but Shreveport, not even the Shreveport area, I'm guessing Shreveport area, I can give you Bossier City, 9 drafted players in the past 5 drafts, which is the second most in the state. So the 318 is holding it down. I know a lot of 318 people, when I put out that story, were very excited about it, and also responded that, and I agree, these next couple of years, there's a lot of good players coming out of North Louisiana, whether it's at Calvary Baptist or Evangel or, any of these schools, West Monroe. It is a big, big point of emphasis for them to be able to lock up North Louisiana as well as they do South Louisiana.
Shea, clip that, Taylor.
Yes, you can clip that. Actually,
go ahead and clip that.
Clip that. That's actually for real, though. Actually, clip that.
Yeah,
and put that on OTB for sure. That's good to have out there. Shea, one guy. So some news today for LSU football. Brian Polian leaving, going to be AD at his alma mater. John Carroll. I guess my question would be a bit along the lines of was this a foregone conclusion? Ever since he got taken from the off-field role, or is it a situation where no, he had a legitimate GM job that he was doing and was going to continue to do, but then he just got an offer that was so attractive that he kind of wanted to go there?
Yeah, I guess I don't know the exact behind the scenes of it. I know that the idea of his alma mater opening up that job is obviously going to be something that entices him. I would say that after he got moved in, from the on-field role to an off-the-field role, I think he was still doing a lot of the same things that he was doing before, right? Yes, he was coaching special teams, but he was also doing all these things about managing the roster and helping oversee the portal, which were things he was still continuing to do then. So I would bet it's a mix of both, and it's a chances. I know he wrote pinned a little goodbye letter and thanked everyone, but I believe him, to be honest, in the fact that if you can move you and your family back to kind of where you're from and be an AD for the first time and do it at your alma mater, that's a pretty cool opportunity.
I agree.
I bet it's a little bit of everything.
Do you think they hire a new GM?
No, I think that it's one of those things where you've got enough people in different places, and you're operated well from the top, right, from Kelly, who's sort of a GM himself, that you can get by. I guess they could, but I wouldn't think that's super high on the priority list.
Talking to Shea Dixon here on OTB. Shea, I know you were just talking about the importance of recruiting Louisiana first. Coaches hitting the road again. How many schools does that entail, you said?
Yeah, so I was talking last week to a couple high school coaches, and then I heard from, was digging around, and they said, look, LSU coaches are coming, storming Louisiana is what they said. So I dug around, and I think LSU had put together, between all 10 assistant coaches who go on the road, it was more than 130 schools that they saw in Louisiana across about 2 or 3 days starting last Thursday, and that was their first time going out on the road. So they ended spring ball, then you had exit meetings with all of the players, where you wrap up the spring semester, and then they immediately went on the road. And instead of going, national and recruiting all your top guys, they did a ton of underclassmen recruiting and really just showed face around Louisiana, which I think is all these high school coaches want. They want to make sure that, hey, if we've got kids who can play at that level, that they're seen and that you come by here and we know the staff, and they're making that a big priority. And it goes back to what I said. Louisiana is going to produce, on average, 10.1 over the past 10 years. They're averaging a little over 10 players drafted a year. If you're correctly evaluating the state and you can get 10 guys in the class that are going to get drafted, let alone other guys that you're going to have on your team that are going to get drafted, that's a big, big number. So I am loving that they are making this. Yes, LSU is a national brand. Yes, you can go get Deshaun Womack, a 5-star in Maryland, who can be a complete game changer. You can go to Georgia and get Ojolari and go to Ohio and get you a transfer quarterback, or Arizona and get you a transfer quarterback. But make the bulk of this roster Louisiana, because there are guys good enough. Star ratings aside, don't worry about that. This is not a state where, and this is just the reality of it, where, Texas, these kids are playing in multi-million-dollar facilities and have really good strength training and conditioning like daily. California has that. A lot of schools in Florida have become like that. Louisiana, I'm not calling out Jacob here, there's only about a handful of schools in Louisiana who have that sort of setup.
Yeah.
So I think that guys in Louisiana can really be developed.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, one of the buzzwords for Brian Kelly's development. So it's a fit.
Hey, Shea, before we let you go, I want to ask you about the transfer portal because, like we have seen in the early window there, I mean, Deuce Chestnut, Omar Spades, Aaron Anderson, some real potential game changers, Denver Harris for LSU. But now, like, you have to be in the portal, but there's still players that are not committed to a school. How active will LSU be in this wave of the transfer portal, and what positions do you think, if they are active, that they'll attack in this window?
Yeah, great question. So they flirted around with O-line and making offers at both the first and second portal window. So clearly they thought that's still a position we could at least use for some depth purposes. Like, you're not going to get a fifth-year senior to be like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm coming, and then competing with 5 returning starters and, a 6-man in either Marlon Martinez or Charles Turner who's played a ton. So really there you want depth. I think tight end, if you could find a guy who maybe only has a year left, that can kind of just come in, help you this year, help bring the young guys along, that would be big. But I'm looking right now at these Louisiana kids, and I know they've got 6 running backs, but you can go to each one of them and point out something of he's been injured, or John Emery's not even with the team, or these guys are true freshmen. Logan Diggs, coming out of Notre Dame, who signed with Brian Kelly out of Rummel and had an LSU offer, is lurking around in the portal. I know he's got a bunch of offers, but if I'm LSU fans, that's one I'm watching. And then Keon Coleman at receiver, who came out of Appalachian Catholic a couple of years ago, went to Michigan State, had about 40 offers, but that was the class where they took Malik and Brian Thomas and Chris Hilton and Deion Smith, Deion Smith was the highest rated one of the bunch, and obviously he ends up not making it through that first year. This is almost like a chance for them to double back and get Keon Coleman, who has certainly proven himself to be kind of one of those top guys alongside the aforementioned. So he's got a bunch of offers as well. Trey Amos, most recently, coming out of UL at corner, has a ton of offers. I know Napier can potentially be considered a team to beat there, but he is a Louisiana kid. He's a kid who won state titles in high school here. So if the point of the portal, as Brian Kelly has said publicly many times, is to get Louisiana guys onto this roster back to Louisiana, they do have a chance with a handful of guys I just mentioned here in the second window.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.